So thank you very much for coming. I want to say this week is probably one of the most liturgically action-packed weeks of the whole series because we're doing the Sundays of Eastertide, which will also include Good Shepherd Sunday, the Feast of St. Joseph, Rogation, Ascension, Pentecost, Trinity, and Corpus Christi. So that is an awful lot to get through in 1 week. It is also some of the more intense pieces, and we've definitely hit Eastertide, as you'll hear tonight. So we are tonight doing Good Shepherd, the Feast of St. Joseph, and then the fourth Sunday after Easter. The Feast of the Good Shepherd happens, in the old calendar, happened a little bit earlier than it happens nowadays. And this particular feast or celebration of the Good Shepherd is significant on a couple of levels. The idea of linking Easter to the Passover and the Paschal Lamb. The linking between Passover happened all the way, it happened because of Holy Week, and the disciples and Jesus were in Jerusalem at the time of the Passover. Passover, according to what we've got in the Gospel of John, Passover was to happen on Good Friday night. So one of the misconceptions of the whole Last Supper thing was that it was a Passover meal. No, Passover is recorded to have happened on Good Friday. There are reasons why there's a linkage, and some of this is kind of post-Holocaust and a reconciliation with what had happened in the 20th century, and to show that we are at one with, that Christianity and Judaism are at one with each other, and it was meant as a good, a worthwhile gesture of unity. So that's kind of where that linkage has come from, although it historically wasn't actually correct, at least from what we have. As Christianity evolved and it became a little bit more established, at least in the public sphere, there was an attempt to try to figure out when Easter was. And the only date that we had at that, or they had at that time, was the date of Passover, that somehow the crucifixion happened on Passover. And since the Jewish calendar was a lunar calendar and the Roman calendar was a solar calendar, they really had to try to dig back into history to find the date. And they came up actually with the date of March 25th as the day of the crucifixion, the day of Passover. Now, the date was kind of contrived because at that time, the 25th of March was considered the commemoration of the vernal equinox. And if you believe in God and creation being united, seeing a celestial event attached to it is of significance. And so anyway, they thought that that the Good Friday was on March 25th, around 33 AD. And this is actually, how they came up with this date is actually documented, and there's actually a stone with the inscription of the calculation that is contemporary to the time period. Now, at that time, it was believed that holy people lived perfect lives. And like, for example, Moses' birth and death dates were the same. So they were also at that time they wanted to link Jesus' incarnation with his death date. And by incarnation, they actually meant the Annunciation. And then that's how we actually got the date Christmas, because it's 9 months after the Annunciation and 9 months after the crucifixion. And so another modern myth is that the date was chosen to subsume pagan holidays, whereas they came up with that date based on a somewhat contrived idea that Jesus was crucified and incarnate on March 25th. The significance of the Paschal lamb, the sacrifice of the lamb, this story is linked through Easter Vigil. And it is a conception that links Judaism and Christianity, and it makes up for, it's part of the prophetic ideas that the Messiah is linked to Judaism, and it's all part of this unfolding story. So that's a long-winded way of talking about the Good Shepherd Sunday. So you'll see this linkage in the postlude for Easter or Good Shepherd Sunday. And it will refer to, this postlude refers to Christ the victim, Christ the priest. And it's a theological mixed metaphor where the Good Shepherd becomes the Paschal Lamb. And so it is a genius little mixed metaphor. And the gospel, this piece is also a tone poem based on the gospel, which deals with the Good Shepherd and the wolves trying to get the sheep. And so you'll hear the sheep frolicking in the fields, and then the wolves snatching them, and the Good Shepherd saving them. This postlude is also significant because there's something called the Tournemire chord, which we'll talk about in the future. It's a giant and often very loud pivot chord. It's usually on a C sharp. This is on a C, and it's usually like a 13th chord based upon the octatonic scale, which we'll go into later. And the Tournemire chord evolves in Organ Mystique and is actually more pronounced in Tournemire's later work, The Seven Last Words. When this chord happens, you will definitely know it. It is a huge clashing chord, and it usually fulfills the role of a denouement or a plot twist. And here, it is Christ being sacrificed and saving the sheep. And so you'll definitely hear this moment. The next week is the Feast of Saint Joseph. And this feast is actually occurs on a Wednesday. But at that time, it was transferred to a Sunday. And this is also what makes Organ Mystique kind of problematic to play, because it's missing some critical Sunday dates. But anyway, so it's not a perfect liturgical work. But that said, the final piece of the Feast of St. Joseph is actually a tone poem based upon the flight into Egypt. So, and this is kind of relevant to today's situation where, with refugees and stuff like that. So in the account, Herod hears of the Christ child being born in Bethlehem, and seeks to have all the newborn male children killed. And so Joseph is given an indication that this is going to happen in a dream, and they flee into Egypt. And so in this postlude, you'll hear Joseph waking up from the dream and telling Mary that they have to leave and flee into Egypt. And so you'll hear the questioning of Mary with all this, and he says, no, we've got to go. And you'll hear at the end of this piece this running pattern as the piece concludes, as the Holy Family are fleeing into Egypt. And the piece ends in a victorious way, but an ambiguously victorious way, because it's a seventh chord rather than a major chord, because even though they have saved their own lives, the martyrdom of the Holy Innocents is happening back in Bethlehem. And then we have the fourth Sunday after Easter. It is the gospel for the day is one of the final discourses foreshadowing the coming of the Holy Spirit. I think actually the music stands on its own, and I actually have no other comment other than just read the text. You'll see what it's saying and what the music is trying to convey. So that said, here we have Good Shepherd Sunday, the Feast of St. Joseph, and the fourth Sunday after Easter. So, first of all, any questions or comments about, yes?
Tournemire began composing, normally speaking, for the Easter service, and for 5 years. Do you see any development in his imagination or style or technique such that had he written the Easter service last instead of first, he would have done anything different?
Okay, so so the question was regarding the order in which he wrote Lord Mystique, and if you can see any development musically, and what would he have done had he written Easter last. It is very subtle. The differences are very subtle. I find that actually the big change so what he did, okay, let's go through the order of how he composed this. And actually in the book, I do put in the dates that they were supposed to have been completed in order. And it's really fascinating because he actually started with 5 feast days. He started with Easter and did 5 principal feasts, the final of which was All Saints. And he was going to call this the Glorious Organ, but then decided to call it Lord Mystique. And you'll see in the original score that he crosses it out and all that. So in those early pieces, you actually do see a link musically. Easter, he does put in the leitmotif chants that are peppered throughout. You can tell he writes the Christmas stuff all at the same time because they all sort of feel the same. And there are certain ways the hands move that clearly at that time period his hands were moving in that way. And then the biggest, after he did the feast, he did secondary feasts, and then he did the year in order or something like that. And when we hit Pentecost, you'll hear sort of all the alleluias sort of sounding the same, all the chorales kind of being one unit, and all the chorale alleluiatiques kind of musically being a unit. The last piece that of Lord Mystique, which is the end of the liturgical year, there's a little bit more free form, like measures that don't have any meters in it. Whereas at the beginning, he does put like 3/4/4/4, even though he's changing every measure. I don't know why you even bother at that point. He does, if you look at Lord Mystique, he has no key signatures. It's all sort of quote unquote written in C major, and he adds every sharp and flat to it. It's a weird, it makes sense for him. And I have to admit, when I was learning, and actually going forward learning all of his works, I have to write in every sharp and flat because I cannot keep track of what's going on because because he's just so writing in such free form, even with accidentals. So there is a little bit. I'm amazed that he was able to keep up the style for so long, for 5 whole years, because that is incredible. Easter doesn't play like any other work, I have to admit. It is one of the hardest offices to try to play. There are things I have to do to amend it because he wants it played so fast, and I don't think you can get all the notes in the amount of time that he indicates. So, yes, and then no. I do see a sense of change of style, but then I'm amazed that he's able to sustain it for 5 whole years. And I think it's because he uses Gregorian chant, which also, by the way, I did get a lot of comments over the past 2 weeks about how does Lord Mystique work with Gregorian chant. So I talked to a friend of mine who's the pre-chanter at St. Clement's, and next Monday he's going to be coming here, and we're going to do an office with the Gregorian chants, so you'll actually hear them in dialogue. I omit them, generally speaking, because I don't want you to, we'll be here all night if we try to do it, but we're just going to do it with one office so that you can hear and get a sense how it would play in a church service without having to go through the whole church service. But you'll musically hear how he's playing off of Gregorian chant, which I think you'll find fascinating. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
There were times where I really had a sense of deep reversion of simplicity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so she was commenting that tonight she felt or heard or sensed Gregorian chant a lot more in these movements, and it's weird. It comes and goes. Early on, like in the first night, we talked about Gregorian rhythm, because if you look at all those dots, they are coupled in 2s and 3s, and there are these squiggly dots that indicate just move this one a little faster. There's actually rhythm to Gregorian chant. It's not dum bum 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 bum. And when Tournemire wrote Lord Mystique, even though he writes it as though it were classical music, with a meter, it has to have a Gregorian rhythm. And I think tonight, some of the pieces tonight had a little bit, had moments of melismas where I'm just holding a chord and then playing a chant. And I think that kind of releases it from the like a classical Mozart, Bach sort of meter, and so you can hear the chant a little bit better. So I think that might be what did it. Any other comments or questions? Or definitely feel free, and especially afterwards. By the way, I have to take my coat off with this because he does a lot of cross. He puts the left hand above the right hand, and my suit jacket gets caught behind my shoulders, and I have problems. And by the way, thank you for tonight. I actually talked about some very controversial things, if you actually think about it, between how Easter came up, and Judaism, the Holocaust, and of course the refugee thing. So thank you for being mature adults about all these concepts, because as we go forward, in Pentecost, we have a little more, when we don't talk as much about the liturgy, we'll actually have time to talk about France and the French Republic, which will get even worse as far as politics are concerned. And Lord Mystique and Tournemire they were reacting against the republicanism in France and the laicization of France, because France, Europe just in general, church and state were locked together, and I think that's a little foreign to us. Well, it is very foreign to us, and that republicanism was very anti-church, which seems very foreign to us as a country. That said, if you go, we're, for those in our viewing audience, we're in Philadelphia, and just in our city, we have Old St. Joe's, which was the first Catholic church in the city, and it was at a time where Catholicism was not much appreciated. And that's why Old St. Joe's is in the middle of a city block. And you have to enter that, even today, you enter through that little gate, and that's because they didn't want the church vandalized, because Catholicism was under threat just by being here. So yes, democracy and Catholicism don't mesh too well because of a variety of reasons. And that we'll have to wait until the season of Pentecost to say why. Anyway, thank you very much. If you have any other questions, tomorrow we are doing Rogation and Ascension Day and the Sunday after the Ascension. So it's all Ascension stuff and the farewell discourses. And then Wednesday, if you're into liturgy, it's an exciting day of Pentecost, Trinity Sunday, and Corpus Christi. So thank you very much.